Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of the Saturday Morning RPG Show. My name is Jordan, with a silent PH in the middle, and I am joined always by my wonderful co-host, Sir Lucian, over at Lucian Gaming. Hello, Lucian. How are you today?
Wow, I love that cadence. I am great today. How are you today?
I mean, they call me Jordan the Silent PH Cadence. That's my full name.
Yes.
Like, he's great cadence, yeah.
It's danger. Yeah. I've seen it.
It is danger, yes. Danger's my middle name. Hello, everybody. Welcome. We have a lot of news to talk about. We weren't here last week, which is probably why we have a lot of news. If you're just joining us, we talk a lot about role-playing game news and the games that we play and lots of other stuff. It's kind of casual and a little fun. I am a little stuffed up. Thank you for noticing, chat. We have so much, dust in the air, and I think allergies because it hit 80 degrees and all of the trees decided to spew forth their pollen, which is the kryptonite of Jordan's. He's a gentleman that likes to stay inside, away from the pollen, but unfortunately that is not what we do. So I will sally forth, though. I will press on. I will do all of those things that
I feel like you live in the land of outdoorsy people, though. Like, when
I
think of where you live, that seems to me like where outdoors people go to live.
You know, and I like outdoorsy stuff, too. And actually, we were thinking of going kayaking today. And we might still do that because it's very warm. Cool. I just need sunscreen and Benadryl to get me through the day. Because I also like outdoorsy stuff. But actually, we were talking about it, and my wife was like, well, maybe I'll just go kayaking, and you can, read on the beach. And I was like, yeah, I could read a book. That'd be nice. So...
I've got all kinds of ttrpgs to read.
I have so many to read, and I was rereading Index Card RPG because that one's really good, and I think I need to run that. I was like, I have all of these games. I wouldn't say that I'm bored with D&D 5th edition, but I am excited to play other systems to the point where I was reading Wild Beyond the Witchlight, and I'm like, what if I run this but with Index Card RPG? That just feels like it would be really cool. But and then speaking of new RPGs, Critical Role announced that Darrington Press, which is their in-house publishing company, is building a deck building game and a board game that they're releasing, and 2 new RPGs, which is pretty substantial. I think there was another RPG back in the day that they were working on, and it had a code name, and I don't remember it, but it never saw the light of day. And I think that this is the transition of that. They were working on that, and then they kind of, worked on it further, and now it's 2 different RPGs. But the first one is a rules light D6 system for, I think they call it single arcs, but it's kind of maybe 1 or 2 sessions, probably minimal level ups. Just kind of, I want to tell this cool story. Here's a bunch of D6s, go. Probably going to be based off of, Core D6, because that's open. But who knows? I don't know. We literally know nothing about it.
We do know 2 facts that I dug up when you put that in our notes. So, one, I believe the name of it will be Illuminated Worlds.
Yes.
And it's the people that are designing it are Strauss Akamovic and Lila Adelman, and it is designed for multiple genres, short one-shots or shorter story arcs, like you said.
Yeah, and is that the one of those people? I think is the one that made Alice is Missing. I could be wrong.
Oh, that could be. I should look that up. I was wondering. That was my question: is do you know who these people are? Because I've watched Critical Role and I've never heard these names.
No,
before,
they hired people. Yeah. Because the longer one, I think Banana Chan is working on the other one that they're working on. So the second one is called Daggerheart, and this is a long arc fantasy of some unknown type. It's going to be a fantasy RPG, D20 based, but we also don't know anything about this. But that is the one that everyone's like, oh my gosh, is Critical Role going to kill D&D? And I'm like, I don't think, no, they will never kill D&D. But we were talking about, or I was talking with some friends, I don't know if you listen to the Adventure Zone. That's another big actual play. And when the Adventure Zone switched from D&D to Monster of the Week, apparently Monster of the Week sold out almost instantly. Like, people were like, oh, what's this? And so they have the fan bases listening there. And if those people tell them to do something, they will do it. You know, like if Critical Role is like, go buy this, like they're going to go buy it. So regardless, these games are going to do well. The big question is, will Critical Role permanently switch over to Daggerheart at some point? And just everything is their own internal RPG, their characters, everything, they own it all kind of a thing. But also with the now 5e core rules being out in the open like that, I think there's no reason to. Like, you could still play D&D and just make it your own flavor of D&D. And maybe that's what Daggerheart is. Maybe it'll be their version of 5e. Who knows? So,
yeah, the only thing I saw, it said it was a new fantasy role-playing game, so it definitely sounds like that's the genre for it. Brand new rule system is the words they've used, so you could interpret that many ways. I also heard both games will be previewed and along with demos this year at Gen Con.
Yep, they're going to be at Gen Con, not doing a live show, which a lot of people were upset about because that's kind of what they were famously known for doing at Gen Con. Yeah. But this is more of a business Darrington Press, like, hey, and they're gonna show off these two things. I definitely am curious, especially about the D6 system, because I like those. So we'll have more information probably leading up to Gen Con, if not at Gen Con. So yeah.
Cool. I'm interested to look at it because I love looking at the new mechanics. I love the idea that more people are taking a shot at mechanics. Me and you talk about mechanics all the time because there's been a lot of work on it in the past. There's been lots of people who have built lots of cool things, but the community's never been bigger, full of more creative people than ever. So they're obviously going to somebody's going to come up with something new and innovative that we've never seen at some point, and just like, wow, that's so cool. So I'm excited to be there when we see those kinds of things.
Yeah, and they have good people working on this. So I think it's important to point out, like, it's Critical Role, it's Darrington Press, and I'm sure Matt Mercer has some like hands in it, but like the point is I think he's a storyteller and a performer. I would be curious how, I know he did the Blood Hunter, but I would be curious about him as a designer. And also, he doesn't have the time. Like, if he's doing all these other things, he probably doesn't have the time to design it. But they did the smart thing, and they got really cool, awesome designers that are working on this with them.
And I think he's still super active voice actor because I still hear his voice.
He was Ganon
tons
or something.
Of games I play and tons of anime I play, or watch. So he's still super active in that field too.
But I was looking up. Banana Chan worked on. I just know her from, and I listened to a podcast about her. Yeah, she's really cool. She worked on Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft, apparently, the Dune RPG, Sea of Legends, Warrior's Edge, and she's done a lot of indie stuff that she's created. She was a contact writer for Kids on Bikes. So, like, I just think she's really cool, mostly because I saw her in an interview, or I listened to her in an interview, and I'm like, you're very outspoken and smart. I like you. And so it was kind of fun. And I was excited to see her name tied to it. Beetle Grimms released another one of their releases, and this one was a little different. It's Keys from the Golden Vault. And so it's all the props and stuff you need to kind of run some of those adventures from Keys of the Golden Vault. But I think this is the first one where they didn't include the adventure. And so full disclosure here, like, Beetle Grimms, they sent me the Dragonlance one, and I thought we were one and done, but then all of a sudden this Keys from the Golden Vault showed up, and I was like, oh, that's awesome. And I'm like flipping through it, and I'm like, well, where's the adventure? And then I went looking on their website, and they were like very clear at the bottom, like, this does not include the adventure. We're trying something new. So now I have all of these extra materials to run Keys from the Golden Vault, but I don't actually have Keys from the Golden Vault. I thought that was interesting because I was like, kind of the point for me was to also get the adventure, but I wonder if they're trying to make it cheaper. I don't know. Than the like $300 price point they usually have.
Interesting. Yeah. Why wouldn't you include the adventure?
It's still $100 for all these props. and it's mostly like letters and puzzles and stuff that you can hand out to your players. But man, if they can get that price point down, I think they're at a like $100 for this and the adventure. I think that's the price point. Like, I want to pay $50 for an adventure and $50 for awesome extra stuff. But it seems like they always get into the 200 or 300 range when it's like, here's the adventure and this. So I'm curious if there will be another version of this, because they always have their, like, this is the silver edition of Eberron, this is the gold edition of Eberron or something. And I wonder if they'll do another edition that will be, here's the adventure along with extra stuff. But look for a flip through of that at some point. Again, my house is in disarray, so I've had a hard time making videos, but I plan to flip through it at least. I haven't read Golden Vault, though. That was the one I didn't buy because it was like the OGL debacle, and I just wasn't interested. I didn't buy Candlekeep either because of the same thing. I didn't want like a bunch of little stories. So, the Orc license is requesting feedback from Paizo. This is kind of older news. And the Orc license is the OGL replacement that Paizo is creating. It's going into a trust, so it won't be able to be manipulated by future Paizo employees and things like that. Kind of like the Linux Foundation, where it's like Linux is like tied into this thing; it can't be messed with. But I wanted to ask you, this is kind of, I guess, a topic of conversation, but now that we have the OGL, or now that we have Creative Commons, like, we won. The players won. They got what they wanted. All this stuff is now free in Creative Commons. Do we need an Orc license? Like, they're trying to tell us that we do, but I was reading it. I'm like, I don't think we need this anymore. Like, I don't know.
Not if it's Creative Commons, right? Because that's where it's truly public, and it's not just we own it, but we're letting you use it. It's like we're saying we don't own it anymore.
It's public stuff.
Anymore.
Yeah,
anybody can.
And you do have to give like a little snippet, like, hey, this was taken Creative Commons thing at the end. And Paizo's saying that, well, if other people want to put stuff into the Orc license, then it's available for other people to use in the Orc license. But if I was a company and I'm writing something, I'd be like, well, I'm either going to put this stuff into Creative Commons, or I'll do a different section that it's like, you can borrow from this. But the whole point of the OGL is not just taking Wizards of the Coast stuff, but other people could put stuff into the OGL. So you kind of have this amalgamation to take from. But now it's all open, so it just doesn't feel, I don't know. It's kind of weird. We'll see where it goes. They're not going to like close it down, I don't think. They're just it's going to be out there, but I'm curious how many companies will use this license. So,
yeah. Well, and I heard that it's in the notes there too, but their revision books that they're putting out has all of the Orc license lingo in it, and it's taken out all of the OGL stuff they used to have in it.
Right. And that's the other thing is they announced they're doing Pathfinder 2nd Edition Remastered. And I think that'll be 4 books that are, they're claiming, a good jumping on point for new players, which kind of makes sense. There's lots of books. Where do I start? I don't know. Maybe it's a good idea. But it's also a way for them to reprint the books without the OGL in it anymore. And so they're going to just move forward with all proprietary stuff, in-house, Orc license, things like that, or public domain things. So these companies they don't want to get messed up by, and no. I know, like, I've been reading Dying Earth stuff. That stuff still has the OGL license in it. So I don't know what Goodman Games is doing. If they're like, well, that was how we were planning on it, but all future projects will not do this. I know they signed up to be a part of the Orc license when Paizo announced it, but that was all like before it went into Creative Commons, and now that it
took about a month and a half, almost 2 months for that to really go through the process, right? So at that point, those companies are thinking about all their Kickstarters that are coming up. They're thinking about all their products they're going to release, and they go into panic mode that was like early February, right? When it just drops the bomb and they have to really rearrange everything. So I imagine they put a lot of time and work into it. So even though a month and a half later it kind of resolves, they've now put in so much work during the unknowns and uncertainty of that month that we're just going to go ahead and go through with it. There's no reason not to use that work now, would be my guess.
Well, and chat made a good point too, where they said Goodman Games and Dying Earth and DCC, they're using the 3rd edition SRD OGL stuff. Mm-hmm. They're not using the 5th edition, and technically it's just the 5e that went into Creative Commons. Even though Wizards said that they wanted to like add the 3rd edition one in there as well, because they're like, why not at this point? And then a lot of people were asking about the 4th edition one, which I would really like to see. I think that would be really cool. But they're like, well, we have to have like lawyers look at it and stuff. And I'm like, you didn't for 5e though. You just dumped it in there. Like, I feel like you're like, well, we gave you too much, and so we're gonna hold back a little bit. But who knows? I don't know. It was a month though of chaos. the OGL wars. It was kind of interesting.
The OGL wars.
But regardless, I'm curious about this, and I personally don't think we need the orc license, but I'm also not a publisher, so we'll see where it comes. You know, I know a lot of the OSR community. And all of those people that do indie games on like itch and stuff, a lot of them are like, this section's Creative Commons, this section's not, or like you are freely able to adapt this page into a new game or to write not a system, but a setting or an adventure for. Because that's the problem with, not the problem, but that's one of the things about RPGs is that you can write a system, but you also have to have some kind of modules for it. And usually the community writes modules for you. And if the community can't sell modules, they're not going to write modules for you. So,
yeah. And the underlying basis of this product is a game where a dungeon master, game master could design their own world. And you're encouraged to do that. And that's a norm. And the rules support that. But we also give you the modules and stuff for those that want to save some time, or they want to be able to get some inspiration or whatever. But at its core, it's meant to be a tool for letting people be creative. So to limit that creativity in any way, you're kind of going against what the whole core of it is. You know?
Yeah. To be able to sell it, I guess, because you could always create stuff, but yeah. But you're right. The whole game is about like co-creation and collaboration and imagination, you know, so yeah. D&D, Wizards of the Coast, they're releasing these new Player's Handbook and Monster Manual and Dungeon Master's Guide. And we knew that the Player's Handbook, there was a UA, we'll talk about it in a little bit, that came out. And the Monster Manual is going to have 500 monsters. They keep talking about it's the biggest monster manual ever. And I'm like, Dungeon Denizens just did their 500 monsters. So I'm like, are you taking a key from them?
Book is 500 monsters.
Is Paizo's book 500 monsters? So there you go.
Yeah.
I think
they're the revised one.
Yeah.
The remastered.
And so these will be, they're very serious that this is 5e. They're like, it's just 5e. It's just 5e, but it's a revised kind of version of the thing. So Chris Perkins did a video on the revised Dungeon Master's Guide, which I found very insightful, because the Dungeon Master's Guide has become just where are the magic items. And I don't think a lot of people use it for maybe what its intended purpose is, which is like adventure creation or I don't know, like a lot of things. And here are the skeletal structure of the D&D universe. Like I use it a lot when it's like, here's the Feywild, here's this. Why do we have these? Because there's adventures that involve this kind of mythology. And here are a list of all of the planes and things like that. So they very much were talking that they're going to reorganize it so people can find things easier. It'll be like, here's how to have an adventure. Here's how to craft a campaign. Here's how to like quickly put together a night of D&D. And a lot of that stuff's already in there. I think they just need to better organize it and make it easier to flip to. But one of the things I thought was interesting is they want the Dungeon Master's Guide to be a book at the table, as opposed to your like prep book. And do you find yourself thinking that you're going to start using the DMG at the table? Like, I'm trying to think of what would be in it that other than magic items. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and in that, I again, like when I listened to that interview too, and there were some things that I thought were super telling about it, because one, he kind of admitted that they were writing 3 books at the same time. They wanted to nail Player's Handbook. They had a lot to do with the monster book. And he kind of said, we might not have did as good a job as we could have on the Dungeon Masters. Like, it was the third of the trio.
Yeah.
That got the least amount of kind of thing. And then he said the greatest thing, he says, if you're a new Dungeon Master and you open that book, you go to page 2 or 3 where chapter 1 starts, it starts you with, let's build an entire universe, campaign, world, and just throws you right into the deep end of, whoa, I'm brand new. I don't think I need to design a campaign world yet. What I need to know is, how do I run this brand new game that I'm excited about? And I've got some friends to come over, but I need to get through a night or two and I need to understand how it works.
Yeah.
And then I can let my creativity go with, I'm going to build a world and all this other stuff. So I kind of thought that made sense when he started talking about it. So I always like when they talk about their mental process and how they want to go back and revise things, and now they've learned those lessons. And I think that's just telling, because I did, when I wanted to come back to D&D 5, all my friends were playing 3.5 still. 4 was out. They all refused to play 4. 5 had just come out, had been out for maybe a couple of months. I went to Walden Books, or I went to one of the bookstores to buy the book, because that's where you bought ttrpgs at the time for me. And I thought, I see the books there, and I'm like, well, if I want to play Dungeons and Dragons, I should get the Dungeon Master Guide, because it's going to have the rules. I bought it, took it home, and realized there's almost no rules in there for me to understand how to play the game. And I was like, I was disappointed. Now, when I did stop and read the stuff that was there, it was super interesting for what it was. But I actually went and made the mistake of thinking, if I want to learn how to play this game, I should buy the Dungeon Master Guide, and it didn't help me. I needed the Player's Handbook if I was going to learn. To be a Dungeon Master, I needed the Player's Handbook more than I needed the Dungeon Master's Guide.
And I think that's important. Like, I wish we would rename the Player's Handbook. It should be like core game, monsters, and then game master assistants, you know, like, because like the game master assistants still probably needs the core game and the monsters, you know, but if you're just playing, you probably just need the core game.
Yeah.
I also really liked that he said a lot of times that he brings stuff up about the DMG, they say that's in there, you know, and so it kind of alludes again to, how do we organize this? And what you were saying, like, don't just start with building a whole universe. Like, every bit of advice I've ever heard is start small. Like, where do you want your adventure to take place? A forest? Okay, they're in a forest. Let's build a forest. And then from that forest, let's build a nearby kingdom. And then from that kingdom, let's build an island. And, oh, now you're a continent. Now you're a planet. Now you're a universe, you know. There's no reason to start with the great wheel cosmology and how it all interacts with your
world.
Build
your calendar.
Although that's fun. Yeah, calendars, like, nobody
day-night
cares.
cycles of moons. Yeah.
So if you want to create your own world, like, they do need to redo it. So, but it'll be interesting. I think it'll be fun. We'll see. It's the one I'm most excited about. Like, I'm not as excited about the Monster Manual or the PHB, but after watching that video, I'm like, I really want this 2024 Dungeon Master's Guide. I think that'll be cool. So
they did use that term a lot too. You just mentioned it, the 2024 books, whatever the title was. So I thought that was an interesting, that sounds to me like that's going to be their marketing push. Whether the community adopts that or calls it something else, we'll find out. But they were in those videos pushing, in the 2024 Dungeon Master's Guide, Jeremy Crawford kept saying, you'll see this and this. You know, and I was like, okay, that's an interesting. With
the changes in the Player's Handbook from the Unearthed Arcana, I can't see people calling this anything else but 5.5. Because if you roll up to the table and you're like, hey, I've got my, 2014 Player's Handbook, they're going to be like, oh, you have 5th edition. That's fine. If you want to play a character from that, you can. We're playing 5.5, so we're going to be a little more powerful than you. and they're gonna be like, oh, and we get feats at every other level and you don't. So again, if you want to play that, it works.
Yeah.
And I think that'll be the problem is like, the mechanics of like an action, a bonus action will all be there, but it'll just be not as powerful because reading this new stuff, like you're very powerful. There's even a huge jump from original player's handbook and then incorporating the Tasha's changes. Like, yeah. And I think people will call it 5.5.
Yeah. I would suggest to the community, let's all be contrary and let's call it 5.75 or 5.25 or
5.12.
Yes. 5.24 because it came out in 24. We got it.
Pre-alpha, yeah. There you go. 5.24. That works. I like that.
Or could we call it advanced 5e? Let's go back to the old school. Basic.
We're never doing that.
Expert 5e.
Expert 5e.
Let's do expert 5e. You can get 2 different box sets. And that would make the one before that basic 5e.
Yeah, there you go.
Oh my God. Branding genius right here.
April Fools, Goodman Games on their podcast did, we're releasing advanced Dungeons Crawl Classics, and I was laughing so hard. I thought it was really funny.
Yeah.
But yeah, 3 new books coming out. They keep referring them to the 2024 books. We'll see what we refer to them as. We don't know yet.
Which means they must be coming in 2024, which makes sense.
They are. Yeah, I'm sure. Pathfinder. Oh, Arby's released dice that sold out instantly thanks to bots. My friends were trying to get some. I didn't see the appeal, but a lot of people were like, it's just for the jokes, for the lulz. And I'm like, still don't care enough, but that's me. I don't know. It just felt weird that everybody wanted these Arby's
go to Arby's and get them? You had to order it? Darn.
They were online. Yeah, you had to order it online.
Oh, I was hoping they were at the Arby's.
I was hoping they should have been at the stores, and then you get people going to the stores, but they sold out within seconds. People were so upset. They had little Arby's hats in them. I don't know. I didn't see the appeal. Whatever. We talked about Pathfinder 2nd Edition Remastered. That's coming out. And now the Player's Handbook Unearthed Arcana. Did you get a chance to read this?
Yeah, we kind of buried the lead here because that's the big news that came out.
This is the big news. It's because it came out later. I've been updating this document over the past 2 weeks, but yeah.
Yeah. It's the biggest UA they put out. Let's just start there.
50 pages.
A ton of stuff. So I've watched some of the videos on it. I've perused parts of it, but I have not word for word read through all 50 pages yet. I'm working through it, but I haven't got there yet. It's a lot of design interesting differences. Like they're really taking some things in some different directions and trying some different things out. And
that's the point of a playtest is like, I like it when they go big and then they're like, okay, let's see how this is. I was joking with our people on Discord that they finally changed the Trident's damage die from a D6 to a D8 versatile to a D8, a D10 versatile, which is something that's always bothered me because I just feel like the Trident should be on par with a longsword. And then I said, the Trident isn't 2d4, 3d4, because that's my personal fix for the Trident. I like that it does... because you have the battle axe that does 1d12, and then you have the greatsword that does 2d6. And I was like, wouldn't it be cool if you have the spear that does this, but the trident does 2d4, 3d4? Like, I thought that'd be kind of fun. And so I was like, the game's unplayable, guys. They haven't changed that. Like, it's unplayable. But so they're doing that. But one of the biggest thing, I guess, is they are incorporating mastery. So when you and again, I think they're making it too swappable because the fighter on a long rest, I think, can change his mastery to something else. And I'm like, I get it. You found a new sword. You want to change your mastery. But I think part of the fun is like, I don't know how to use that. I'm a master of the axe, so I will forego this magic blade, I guess.
So you're going to jump into the class stuff first.
Well,
let me add something.
Go ahead.
And then continue that thought. So in this is weapons changes to actual weapons and equipment, which I thought was really big and different.
Yeah.
Spells, some changes to spells, some feats, and then 5 classes are featured in this one with some interesting, some of them significant changes. Yeah. So, okay, now continue.
No, so that's what I want to talk about. Like, the weapons didn't feel that different to me, other than they have this mastery now, which is if you are if you have a weapon mastery in a particular weapon, like the club, the mastery is slow. When you hit somebody with a club, there's a chance that the enemy's speed is reduced by 10 feet. And so that's kind of cool. And especially I like it with the bow and arrow or the crossbow, because it's like I picture someone charging at you and you're firing crossbows and it's slowing them down as they're trying to get towards you. And it feels very thematic, and I like that a lot. There was push, which is like knock them down. I'm trying to think of some of the other ones. I guess
sap, graze, cleave.
So cleave, you can hit a second creature within 5 feet. Flex, you can make... you do versatile damage, even though you're holding it in one hand, so your longsword can do a d10, and you can still have a shield, I guess. Graze, you do a little bit of extra damage. Nick, you can
Graze is on a miss, but you
on a
still
miss,
could do some damage.
Yeah, I don't know if I like that one, but that's a... Yeah, I don't know. We'll see. Yeah, and then like push, what was sap? Sap, they have disadvantage on their next attack roll. So some really cool things. It's a lot to track, though. Do you think... Sure. I have friends that play fighters because it's easy. Like, they want to just roll, did I hit? Cool. And now it's like, I have to follow this. Like, Jordan would like this kind of fighter, but I don't know if... but I guess the original Player's Handbook is still there. Like, whatever. And this is all playtest stuff, so...
Here's what I like. But let me preface that with Lucian is a tactical role player first and loves the nitty-gritty of moving around and thinking about abilities, and the combat is so exciting to me. Okay. I like this because I thought in 5e what we lost was that equipment really didn't matter. It didn't matter if I had a short sword. It really didn't matter if I had a long sword. There wasn't a ton of difference unless I was going to min-max damage in some way.
Well, you're right, because people, like, all thieves went with short swords because it's a D6 rather than a D4. And I was like, but you're a rogue. And it's like, well, it doesn't matter. I get the exact same bonuses, and this one does a D6. I'm never going to use a dagger. Yeah. You're like, oh.
And there's no reason for you to maybe have more than one weapon, typically. You know, if you go back to the piercing, the bludgeoning, and the slashing. But even then, 5e is kind of just made equipment not as thing. Whereas I remember D&D, equipment was the lifesaver because you never got a ton of abilities. You never got a lot of stuff until you made it in higher levels. So your equipment really did matter, a lot. Whereas I just didn't feel like it mattered as much recently. So I agree, when I see these things that allow you to be more proactive if you wish to, I like it, but I also know the danger is, could it slow combat down in some way? Because you're adding some complexity. Now there's some extra things here, but I guess in some ways it's just like adding a condition. So just like you learn the conditions of what happens to somebody, I'm guessing these are like a subclass of conditions that these weapons are going to do. And it's on the player to remember those pieces and not necessarily the dungeon master to remember that kind of thing.
Well, and some of them we already know, like prone. It's like, okay, there's a prone condition. There's this, and especially that was it Nick or Graze, where it's like, oh, I missed, but I do 3 damage. And then you like walk away. You're like, okay. So, but you're right. I think weapons were not, or just equipment in general was not very important. But I like the aspect of I guess I want to lean into that more. And then going into the fighter aspect of it, where you can change your mastery every night, that I want you to be like, no, I'm the greatsword fighter. Like, this is what I was made to do. And so then I want that interesting choice of like, well, here's a magic short sword, but you don't get to do your cool greatsword stuff because you're not good with that. And as you level, you can master other weapons. I kind of like that, but I really want you to be like, no, I'm the greatsword fighter, or I'm the rapier fencing fighter. Like, I think that could be a lot of fun.
Yeah. And I think a byproduct of making equipment not really matter. And there's a lot of people that think equipment shouldn't matter at all. Like, just take it out of the game. It just shouldn't even be there.
Okay.
But I think it also impacts, because they're like, why track how many arrows we've got? Why track how many rations? Why we're just,
it's a different type of game when you're tracking
we
that.
Need.
But
yeah. But because that's such I think an unused portion of the game, and they put barely anything to it, it affected magic items too, I think. And it made magic items not as plentiful and interesting, and they didn't put a lot of time into them, because obviously if equipment doesn't really necessarily matter, then magic items are a little, it's your abilities and what you get at your class levels and what you can do when you multi-class, or what.
Yeah.
That's where all of the power seems to have gone for 5e, which is cool. I love it. I play it every week. I love my characters. I love building characters, but I do. That's what I miss from 3.5. I miss that equipment mattered, and not for theme, for what you could do, for the way your character could be built. And I mean, just think of that fighter that had all the different weapons and reasons for it. Like, I've got my axe, I've got my sword, I've got my, all these things, because I could use, there's going to be times where I need all that stuff. Whereas I don't find that as when I play my fighter now, I'm not switching gear very often.
Yeah. And I wonder if the original 5e plan was, this monster is weak to piercing. So you are like, you're hitting him with your club, and then you're like, okay, as a fighter, I'm going to pull out my spear. And it's like, oh, now I can do extra damage. But we never see that. It's always like this creature's immune to this with non-magical weapons. Yeah. And then everybody's got a magic weapon because it's 5e. And so, but you don't treat it as a magic weapon. You treat it as, I got a +1 because I have this sword. And so I don't know. I like these changes. I just think that it will slow down the game, because anytime you add complexity, it's going to slow down the game. But I want to preface that with, that's not always a bad thing. Like, sometimes people really like big epic combats. And if you are the type of person that's like, hey, we have our like 2 little mini skirmishes that maybe I don't need to worry about this because the goblin's dead in a round anyway. But in the big fight, like, I want to make sure that this cultist cannot move 10 feet, or I want to make sure that this guy's prone. And that's where the synergy comes in, and that can be a lot of fun. So,
yeah. I will give you an example. In the fight where we're fighting Illithids and the big Illithid elder dude who has all kinds of things going on, and Orogs, and there's Ettins, and everything's going on, we need every little piece of these things right now in our game so we don't die.
Yeah.
So I want them. I want them now.
I'm just thinking of our Warlock in my game at Nathan's is a new player, and he's constantly like, oh, like, I have a bonus action. What can I do? And I'm like, not really anything. And he feels like he does it. Oh, I'm wasting it. And it's like, well, you hexed him, but like, I don't know. And I wonder if it's going to turn into one of those things where people are like, okay, I've got 7 weapons. Which one would be the best one? I don't know. I think. And it's like, no, I wish that you had just chosen Greatsword at the very beginning so you knew what you were going to do, as opposed to now I can do it on the fly. But
I think these are for the min-maxer person. I think they're the person who's going to know and can't wait to tell the dungeon master, aha, I used my sword and it has slow, and I use it on this guy, and guess what, dungeon master, your guy can move 5 feet less, or whatever, whatever the rule is, because they're that,
but
they're
just
ready
because
to use that
just because this might be good for min-maxers doesn't mean that a new player, even now, a new player will be like, I'm going to pick up wizard. And it's like, you want to? Really? And now you're like, oh, I have so many options. What do I do? When really you need, that's why I liked warlocks back in the day. Because it's like, you've got 2 spell slots. You can do 2 things. What do you want to do? And instead of the wizard where it's like, fireball, I don't know, maybe. And so, but lots of spells. And
with the warlock changes.
Yeah, speaking of warlock, there's lots of changes.
Some big changes there too.
So we talked about this before. There's the new arcane spells, divine magic, and primal magic. So they're dividing spells up into these categories. But yeah, and then there's some new spells that feel like abilities to me. Like Book of Shadows, the conjuration cantrip for Warlock. It takes an hour, but you conjure this book, and now you have this book and stuff like that. I just feel like that should have been an ability, but maybe they're doing this to stop people from multi-classing or taking those like 1 or 2 level dips to get something. Instead, it's like, no, you could just take a feat that would give you that. And now you don't have to do all these weird multi-classes. So there's probably a reason behind it. I don't know. We'll see. But the create...
What about this one, Jordan? Create spell.
Create spell, right, yeah. So there was another one where it's like create spell, which is like a modify. There's another thing called modify spell and memorize spell. And these are spells, which feels weird. But you can scribe them out. And so they're giving us a little more in-game mechanical tools to create your own spell. Some people, like, I was talking to Ted about this, and he's like, oh man, I can make like the world's best counterspell using this. And I was like, yeah, but like, and again, we need Wizards of the Coast to sometimes tell us that it's okay to hack the game. But I was like, I've always been like, I'm a wizard. By the time I'm like level 5, I'm just like, I want to make my own spell. And one of my favorites was Joshe's Conjured Weapon when I was playing Joshe the Conjuration Wizard. And I would like summon a big weapon, like a mallet, and hit him on the head, and then it would disappear. And it was just a fun, flavorful spell that I could do, and I liked that. But yeah, you can create a new spell or modify an existing spell to do like a new effect. Like you could have Fireball that's actually Acid Ball, which is kind of a cool idea. So...
And I think I think it's the coolest thing that they're letting it. And like you said, we always could have done this. Your dungeon master always has creative control, and your players have creative control to work together and build these things. But I'm glad it's in there because we have all of those big B's hands. We have all these named spells that just make you think eventually my wizard can be good enough that my wizard was Vanguard. So eventually Vanguard could have Vanguard Shield or something.
Yeah.
And feel more immersed in the world. You feel more connected when you can do something like that from the wizard standpoint. And like, I just love that. I love that it's in there and that it's available.
I mean, I guess this is how I think. It's like if I'm running a game in my home world, and we'll use Vanguard and Joshe, and like Joshe creates Joshe's Conjured Weapon, and Vanguard, like maybe you make a magical item that is like Vanguard Shield. And then when I start a new campaign and it's like 200 years later, it's like some adventurers find this mysterious relic of Vanguard's Shield. Like that's cool and has always been a possibility in the game. But now maybe it'll happen more so, you know? Like I love the name of giving my spell a name that it's like I created the spell. So yeah.
Yeah. I even love the idea that you were a conjuration wizard. They did such a great job on this. And mine, I did the war wizard subclass, and I made my guy a really kind of frontline, throw up a shield around him, but he's in the thick of it, fighting wizard as much as I could with all the spells I could that could support that. And it would be cool that Joshe's a wizard too, but those two characters are very different. They're wizards, but they're very different, and they would just fit into the fantasy world really well and not just be, oh, we've got 3 warlocks, well, they all kind of play the same. Or we got 3 barbarians, they're all kind of the same. I love that 5e gave us all these options to really help us create different identities for the classes that we're playing.
Yeah, my Great Modron March game, like Ted and Lex have very different wizards, and they're both wizards. And it's like, okay. Interesting that Find Familiar is a spell on here, but also the Pact Familiar. Or what is it? Yeah, Pact Familiar is a warlock spell that I guess just allows you to have aberrations and celestials and dragons instead of maybe just like the cat. I don't know.
Or undead.
Yeah, I guess you get undead.
Is listed there.
Skull or shadow. Oh yeah, skull floating around you. That'd be really fun. Kind of Dresden Files-ish. That'd be kind of cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, some of these spells like Pact Weapon, a lot of these, if you can pick them up with feats, this'll really open up a lot of different play styles. I think it'll be kind of interesting.
Well, Jeremy Crawford said something really interesting in the video out on the channel, that when he was talking about Warlock, is that you picked your subclass at level 1 with Warlock. So you never really, if you started at level 1, you never played as the Warlock first, got used to being what a Warlock is, and then the subclass comes in and refines or specializes you in some way.
Yeah.
You were always just, you know, a fae, a fiend, or, you know, whatever the ones that you would have picked at that great old one, you know, warlock. And I thought it sounded really cool that they wanted to remind players and show them that warlock is the class and it has lots of cool features to it. Your subclass has cool stuff too, but they want to make sure that warlock has more of an impact, because you never felt like you were a warlock plus something. You always felt like you were just that one thing. So I thought that was interesting, because they want to move where you pick your thing, but they want you to be able to do things right from first level also that still make you feel like a warlock. And what is a warlock compared to a wizard, compared to a sorcerer, and how are they different? You know, the more academic version of magic, and you're finding magic and using the weave to do things, and you're using knowledge that's been out there, but the sorcerer is about magic that's within, and you're trying to craft or change how that is, and that's why it's different than the wizard or say the warlock. And the patron wasn't doing a ton in warlock games, and they want to make that more of the piece. So I think that when they go back and they look at these classes, I love how they're trying to think about the classes and how to really revitalize them in some ways. Go and watch the video, because whenever I listen to Jeremy Crawford talk about that,
he's got a lot of good points, and he does a really good job. I think they were smart releasing that video before they released the UA. At the time, I was upset because I watched the video and I'm like, where's the thing? But I also wonder if they get a lot of people who, I don't need to watch that, I'll just jump over to reading it, you know, because they release it at the same time. And this was like, no, that was smart, because you got to hear his design choices before you started reading it. So that was good. But no, that's something that I've been thinking about a lot reading DCC Dying Earth. Go ahead and take a drink. They have the Magician, which feels like a regular Vancian wizard in Dungeons & Dragons 5e. It feels like a wizard in 5e because you have spell slots and you learn them. Yeah. Has very... you know the outcome of the spell you're about to cast. And then the traditional DCC wizard feels kind of like a sorcerer, where there's spells within you, but when you cast it, you're not entirely sure how it's going to happen. Like, am I going to do a lot of damage, a little? Am I going to teleport? Am I going to turn into something? But like the magic is there. And then also in Dungeon Crawl Classics Dying Earth is the witch, and the witch feels like a warlock. You make a pact with something and you get these weird curses that you can put onto people. And it's weird where I'm like, I don't know, maybe I'm just a big DCC fanboy at this point, but I'm like, I feel like you're doing the different types of magic better than 5e. Because like 5e, everybody's got spell slots. You know, a sorcerer feels like a warlock, feels like a wizard. Not necessarily in this UA, but just in the past. And I was reading that and I'm like, these feel so different and so thematic. And a witch is more akin to a cleric than it is a wizard, because you're getting your magic from like an otherworldly being. So videos coming soon whenever I get time to record them. But I made one DCC video already, and I plan to go through because I have a lot of thoughts on all of these different classes. So it's pretty cool. But I do like the sorcerer changes, that you are like, you have this wellspring of magic within you, rather than like, I've learned to manipulate the weave as a wizard. And it feels like a lot of the sorcerer things they added in this UA are, I can just kind of chaos. And I like that. It made me think of the Scarlet Witch. And I'm like, I feel like she is a good sorcerer in comparison to Doctor Strange, who feels to me like a wizard, you know? So
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And then lots of feats. Go ahead. Sorry.
Oh yeah. No, yep. Keep going. I'll wait till you get to classes.
No, you're just fine. Lots of feats. I don't really want to touch on them. There's a lot there. But then classes, we can start there. Yeah. Talk about barbarians.
Well, what I liked is my group, whenever these come out, they always look at them. And so we have a barbarian. And so I think of, are these cool? Did my barbarian like them? And he's like, I liked some of the things I'm reading. You know, we were looking at the fighter. I'm the fighter, arcane archer. I like some of the things they were talking about in the fighter here. I was like already wanting to try some of these things out. We don't have a sorcerer, so I'm interested to hear somebody who plays sorcerer a lot if they liked some of the changes of sorcerer, because they really talked about, you know, changing it so it felt more like your magic really kind of was like embodied what you did, and really try to make it different than, like you said, the Vancian style of the wizard, which I think is the wizard should have been the Vancian guy. And I like, and you just described it. Whereas they really could have went a different direction with the other ones and not made them Vancian. But, you know, I think we're starting to get a little bit of that with this. Not quite yet, but, you know, there's still more to it.
It feels weird to me that a sorcerer would be able to cast, Liamin's tiny hut. I'm like, why would a sorcerer be able to do that? You know, because it doesn't feel very raw magic. And I guess I'm going to go back to my Scarlet Witch thing, where I'm like, it feels like the Scarlet Witch can cast Charm Person. It just looks really different than Doctor Strange casting Charm Person. You know, the Scarlet Witch is like in your brain doing weird magical stuff. Doesn't really understand how she's casting it, but she's casting it. So I think a lot of my problems with the sorcerer can be changed into maybe this spell can be described better and it'll work better, kind of a thing. But then with this, it almost is like you, especially with the Draconic Sorcerer, which is the subclass we got, it is very much like, boy, I've got this Draconic heritage. Magic is just in my bones. And not the meta magic so much, but like the elemental affinity, like I can change stuff. I can do this. I can manipulate a spell to be a cone, like a dragon, rather than being just a whatever. Yeah, I don't know. And so it's like, yeah, you have this sorceress burst. You can exhale it in a 15-foot cone rather than selecting a single target. And I don't know. There was just cool things like that. That this sorcerer feels a lot better. I did play a sorcerer only up to level 6. That was Espen, and even when I was playing that, I liked the thematic of I was a Draconic Sorcerer, and I liked the thematic of it, where I had a lot of fire spells and everything was fire related. And looking at this, I'm like, I feel like I can take all of that fire related energy and bump it up even another notch. And so now it's like I'm encouraged to take more fire based spells because of my fire synergy, and I like that. So yeah, I don't know. I like that they changed, what was it? Careful spell. They merged a couple of meta magics for the better. A lot of this is quality of life changes. That's how I felt about the Barbarian, where I looked at it and I'm like, well, that just makes sense, and it makes it play better, you know?
Yeah. And it was, they looked at stuff because they've been doing the surveys, and they were looking at the things that people use a lot. And then they were saying, well, what does nobody use? Well, why don't we look at that and figure out, either remove it, because if nobody's using it, shouldn't be there, it takes up space, or could it be changed into something that is useful, or should it just be something that's removed?
Or if they never take it because they feel compelled to take this because they have to like be good.
There's only one good choice. They hate that.
I have to take Eldritch Blast, and then look what they did. They made Eldritch Blast just part of the features, you know, or Hex. Hex is just part of a Warlock now, as opposed to, well, I have to take it because, you know, otherwise I can't do the damage I'm supposed to do. And so
yeah, because they redid some like Eldritch Invocations. They were touching those up, you know, and they've done this for all the subclasses. So I think it's interesting. I can't wait to see. They touched on a lot of the classes that I play, so they were all really cool to me. A lot of the ones I'm interested to see what the other classes will look like, but I don't play them as much. Like I don't play Paladin very much. I haven't played Rogue very much, Thief very much. I haven't played Druid very much, but I'm still interested to see how they go and take a look at those ones. Ranger. Oh, I can't wait for a Ranger revised.
I'm very excited
edition.
for I like Rangers a lot, and I'm interested in where they're going to go. Especially with, you know, this one had an emphasis on, not this one particularly, but we got updated rules for summoned monsters, like summon aberration, summon elemental, where everything kind of plays off of your level and your proficiency bonus. With Rangers, I wonder how they're going to start doing the animal companion, you know, because I'm a big fan of pet classes, and I'll be interested to see how it works. So
yeah, for sure. It's a lot. There's
a lot in here,
50 pages.
And we haven't even talked, I think the least touched was the wizard, but they even got a bunch of extra stuff. Something I just put in my head right now, put together, is that Eldritch invocations are just feats for warlocks. Like, I wonder how that system will change when there are feats. And maybe you just need to change Eldritch invocations into, this is a feat only a warlock can take. Like a level 5 warlock can only take this feat. And get rid of the whole Eldritch invocation in general. Because they're cool, but the more I think about it, I'm like, they're just feats, but they're specific feats. That's weird, you know?
It almost should be like patron boons.
Yeah.
Because the only person that's going to get patron boons are going to be the warlock.
Yeah.
And nobody else would be able to get that. And then they should be themed, I think, in the version of the, you know, those. That would be, I think, a great way to go for them. Because I think what you just said was definitely true for sure.
They did a really cool thing with, is it Mistress or Mysterium, Mystic Arcanum. So before, they always had these really dumb not dumb, but just like long names for a Eldritch invocation that gave you the ability to use a spell. And they got rid of all of those and replaced it with one called Mystic Arcanum. And you can take this multiple times. And when you take it, you can gain a spell. And I was like, that's so much better. So it's like, if I am a level 7 warlock, I can take Mystic Arcanum to have the ability to cast any 4th level spell. And then it's up to the player to kind of take a spell that feels right for them, you know? So, yeah. Anyway.
I agree, because I think a lot of people will do those dips to get just one or two things.
Exactly.
And if you can give those one or two things in a feat somehow, now we don't have to have the convoluted, you know, multi-class, which I'm dive straight into with my guy, and it's complicated because of the different hit points that they can have, and all the stuff, and how they level up, and then what spell levels work with what, because you have 2 different spell casting. It's a lot to go into, and it makes it overly complicated than it has to. So yeah, I agree. If they can move that into the feats and make it so we don't need to dip into Warlock to get this thing, or to dip
and then you can still play it, you know, however you want. You know, you could be like, hey, I'm a level 8 fighter, but I took this weird feat that gives me like a third eye or something, and I even like the and so, you know, you could see in darkness, like, and that's a warlock thing that you can do. I'm making this up. I don't know if it's an actual thing, but I like that. And then I'm even thinking, like, as a dungeon master, I want to hand out feats based on what happened in the game. So, like, we finish an epic fight, and it's like, you know what? You're getting really good with that sword. Here's your mastery feat. Like, the players don't get to pick them, but based on what happens. And then it's like, oh, the Raven Queen brought you back to life. You get this cool feat where you can now speak to dead because of that. Like, handing them out as rewards, I really like. So we'll see. We'll see where this goes. But, boy, yeah, it's a lot. Read it, save it, keep it forever, so you have this, you know. Yeah. Real quick before, because we're at time, but the people that made the Art and Arcana book, which was like a coffee table book about D&D, it's really cool if you like the history of D&D. Those people are making another one, which is basically the history of 5e and like its impact on society and culture and how it's grown from 2014. And it's called Lore and Legends. It's pre-order right now, but I think it's going to be really awesome. Keith Baker Presents is their publishing company that Keith Baker was part of, where he made a lot of the DMsGuild supplements, and they're shutting it down. I'm not entirely sure why they're shutting down, other than maybe Eberron is not in the spotlight as much as it used to be. I don't know how well those books are selling on the DMsGuild, but I think the OGL debacle had a big part of that, where I think Keith Baker realized, you know, the more I create for Eberron, I'm just helping Wizards of the Coast. I'm never helping me, because I can never do what I want to do with Eberron. And so I think this was an experiment, but they're shutting down. They had a really sad tweet, and it's just kind of like, okay, we're done. And then you found this, Lucian, which was really cool. There was a Guinness World Record about 1,200 consecutive D&D players.
1,227, I think, is the record right now that me and Jordan are now planning to beat. No, but yeah, they play. It was the single largest game.
Yeah,
they had a
And so when we say
Dungeon Master,
single game, like there were multiple tables and they were all battling a giant fight against Vecna. And then there were people that I've never played like this, but there were people in the room that were like, okay, did you win? Did you do this? And they would report back to like
the runners. Yeah.
The runners. And then the runners are tallying like how well the overall fight is going. And I was like, that's cool. But it was in a mall in Provo, Utah, which is just a little north of Salt Lake, I think, maybe south. And then, they had 1,200 people who all, I guess the guy did this before and he only had 500 people. But now it's also gotten, D&D's more popular and it's your second time doing it. So,
and I think the record before that was like 667 or 600 or something.
Yeah.
So he kind of doubled the record. So it'll be interesting to see. And it's a Guinness Book World Record. It's not just like we're just saying it.
I feel like you could do this at Gen Con so easy.
Cool.
Like you're just like if Wizards of the Coast rolled in and they're like, all right, guys, we're going to and this was a battle against Vecna, I guess I should say. But it's like, all right, guys, we're going to battle Vecna and just get like hundreds of people playing. I bet you could break this at Gen Con so easy, but still, I think it's really cool. This guy's he runs a gaming store in the Provo Town Center Mall, and so that's where they had it. I remember this place as a child because I went there for a Pokemon tournament when I was like 14 or 15. So I was like, I remember this mall back in the day. It was kind of cool that it's still there and they're doing nerdy stuff there. So
I wonder if we could reach out to him, have him come on the show as an interview.
Yeah,
just
probably.
Talk about how they did it and what they did and what it was like. Because that'd be interesting to understand from a dungeon master perspective. You're running hundreds of tables that have probably DMs at them. You have runners coming up to an overall DM who's trying to manage the whole thing. But it sounds cool,
Yeah, I've never ran or I've never been a part of like epic things like that. And so I don't know. I'm curious too how it would work. But they must have a formula, and so I don't know. But we'll see. Kind of fun. Lots of tables. They were all there at the mall playing, which is kind of the cool thing. So yeah, that's our show. We'll talk about our talking point next week. Or no, we won't be here next week. That's right. So we'll try to figure out something there. I am going to be on Goodman Games Twitch tomorrow at 3 Pacific, I think. I got invited to play in an X-Crawl game, which is a version of DCC called X-Crawl. I don't know exactly what I'm playing. I think we're level 1. I've never played X-Crawl, but it's DCC, so I should be okay. But you should check me out there on Goodman Games' Twitch. That's going to be really fun. World Builder Bob's going to be there, and Lex. We're going to have fun.
Oh, boy.
Yeah.
That's a crew.
That'll be good. Anything else, sir, before we take off?
We had so much, but that's our show. How
there's a lot of news. Yeah. Because we were backed up on news, and I was like, oh, it's a UA. That's going to take forever. But again, you guys can follow us on social media. I'm Jordan with a PH in the middle on all of the social medias except Telegram. I'm not there. If I ever contact you on Telegram, that is a scam. Don't do it.
Not me.
That is not me. And I will never contact you. So there you go. I have the Patreon. And if you are curious, I've been working on my D12 RPG system that I've been working on. I was working on that during the week, and I'm going to upload another updated document to.
Because what's better than 1d6?
2 together to be 1d12. Yeah. No, it's weird. I get really excited about modular d6 and I'll work on that for a little bit, and then something will inspire me while I'm writing that I'm like, that actually would work better for Tolv, and so then I'll run over and I'll start writing on Tolv. And I go back and forth a lot. But it's fun. It's all for fun. So yeah. But if you're curious, I update things there. I'm also going to download a lot of get the Great Bodron March podcast through the Patreon. I've been severely behind on that, but things are happening in my house and life. So there you go. That's it, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for watching. We will see you all not next week, but another week after that, maybe. We'll see. As summer hits, we're all getting really busy, but we'll try to catch you the next time on the Saturday Morning RPG Show. Take care, everybody. Bye.